And hello and welcome to PM Express on this Monday. Tonight, the RTI bill, will Parliament finally deliver? It's a fundamental question. Why? Because this has been in Parliament for more than a decade. We've been here before. Many times the bill comes to Parliament with promises that it will be passed, only for us to get to the end of a certain session of the House and it's not passed. Almost every president since it was brought to Parliament had made a promise that it will be passed under their tenure. They don't get to fulfill it before they are either removed from office or the Parliament itself changes. And as we've seen, in the last 1 week or so, there's been a renewed push from a coalition of NGOs and civil society groups pushing through and hoping that Parliament will yield to the pressure to pass this all-important legislation, the Right Information Bill. And we've seen last week that the coalition members, some of them went to Parliament to protest. They wanted to get into the chamber to make their voices heard. They were prevented from entering Parliament itself. A lot of them complained about this. But then we heard from this man. He is the Minister responsible for Parliamentary Affairs, but also the Majority Leader, Chairman Sabonsu, who said on that day, on the back of the protest, that essentially he and his colleagues in Parliament will not be pressured into passing the law. Listen to it.
Not responding to any pressure. We know what we must do, and we'll do it. The people of this country have sent us here to do a good job for them, and that is what we are going to do.
Isn't that why we are where we are?
So why should anybody exert pressure on you before you do what you are expected to do? Nobody should rush Parliament.
That is the Majority Leader. His colleague, Katie Hammond, I guess, put the words that I guess most members of Parliament, some say since the beginning of this bill, he expressed an opinion that some suggest many of his colleagues hold but are not able to express publicly. The reason some point to that maybe this bill hasn't been passed for more than a decade. Listen to Katie Hammond, a fascinating opinion he expressed.
A gold mine for journalists, he says it. It is not a gold mine for the generality of the populace. The general, it's just the same way you are going about it. I can understand. You need it because gold nuggets are in there everywhere for journalists. That's what you need. One single slip, ministers can't operate. Governments cannot proceed effectively. Governance cannot take place meaningfully with this sort of, I don't call it sword of whatever hanging at this albatross riding around you. Understand, you need a peace of mind to run a government. You need to concentrate to run them. If you have a bill like, bring this, before the ink even dries on it, somebody's asking for it, bring this document. This or that. How you to the extent that we're talking about communication between president and the vice president, the cabinet and this and that, potentially you can have, so there will be no secret in government.
So there'll be no secret in government. Did he just speak the mind of many of his colleagues? The real reason why maybe they are dragging their feet and not wanting to pass the bill? We'll be interrogating that today, but also we'll be interrogating a few of the sticking points, as you've seen on my screen here. One of them, that information from Parliament is exempt. Second one, that this, if you have an issue as far as the freedom of information is concerned, go straight to the Supreme Court. Civil society say that is an issue that we need to address. Also, what about if information, you're seeking information from a private entity that is using public funds? That is one of the key issues that needs still to be fine-tuned. We'll be interrogating all these and more here on PM Express. Plus, the parliamentarians last week imposed on themselves a 15th November deadline. But we just said maybe by that time they would have passed this particular act or bill into a law. Will they stick to that, or are we going to have another disappointment? PM Express, my guests are seated. When we return from the break, I will introduce them and we'll start interrogating the issues. And in the studio with me today is a man who was former Attorney General, but also a member of the committee that is dealing with this particular document, Dr. Dominic Ayine. Doc, thank you very much for joining us here on PM Express.
Thank you. But by the way, I was Deputy Attorney General, not Attorney General.
Deputy Attorney General, yes. Yeah. Also with us is the chairman of Parliament's Parliamentary Constitutional and Legal Affairs Committee, Ben Abdallah. Thank you very much, sir, for also joining us.
Welcome.
And a good friend of mine, a campaigner, Kojo Asante. He's been doing this for a long time. Dr. Kojo Asante, to be more precise. And Doc, thank you very much for joining us on this all-important conversation. Let's start from where we just ended with Katie Hammond, because what he said there, yet last week when he said it, it got a lot of backlash. But let me start with you, Ben Abdallah. When you heard that, what's your reaction? He's your colleague.
Thank you very much, and let me say good evening to all your viewers and listeners, of course. Katie Hammond, I came to meet in Parliament, and the Right to Information Bill is older than me, so far as the number of years that I have spent in Parliament is concerned. He has made it categorically clear, unequivocally, that the Right to Information Bill, the passage of it, will open the government to too much scrutiny.
Yeah.
So right from onset, he made his stand clear that he's opposed to it. And as a member of Parliament who can claim parliamentary privilege, he's entitled to his opinion. The fact that Katie Hammond belongs to the government doesn't mean that Katie Hammond cannot speak contrary to the stand of the government.
Okay.
That is his opinion. He's entitled to his opinion. And Parliament is a house of debate, a house of proceedings, a house where members of Parliament are entitled to speak frankly and honestly, bordering on any issue that is brought before Parliament. But that is the stand of Katie Hammond. That is not the position of the government. Many members of Parliament may agree with him. Others may disagree with him. I, for instance, disagree with him. And I have my reasons for disagreeing with him. And
why do you disagree? The position that he adopts, that government will be... Governance will not be effective.
No, I mean, government, if the bill is passed, will be open to too much scrutiny.
Yeah. Says it to be an albatross around your neck.
I differ in the sense that information that is churned out to the public will be assessed. No information is sent out to the public in its raw state. Every information, that's why we have an information officer in every public institution. As soon as the information officer receives the information officer must first of all assess the information and examine the risk element involved in the information. If, for instance, the disclosure of the information will be bordering on national security, the information officer is obligated not to disclose the information. So first of all, we have categories of information. So as soon as the information is received, the information officer must first of all access the information and categorize the information. Which information is disclosable and which information is not disclosable. And in any case, democracy across the world feeds on information. No country, no democracy thrives or developed without the citizenry having access to adequate information. If the citizenry are not permitted to have access to adequate information, how do they check the government?
That's an interesting pronouncement, and I just wonder why, if you hold this view, it's still taking us this long to even get to where we are. But let me bring in Dr. Ayine. Dr. Ayine, I want to just quote what Katie Hammond said, because most people have argued in this side of the profession. my colleagues that maybe this is really the reason why this is delayed, and that he says it's a gold mine for journalists. It's not for the generality of the populace. First of all, he believes this is just going to benefit journalists. He says one single slip, ministers cannot operate, governance cannot proceed effectively, meaningfully. With this form of albatross hanging around our neck, we need peace of mind to operate. There will be no secret in government.
Thank you very much. I think my honorable friend Katie Amon was struggling, internally to express the balance that must be held between maintaining the requisite level of secrecy in government that makes a democratic state to be able to operate and run its business in a way that is responsive to the needs of the people, and at the same time also open government up to scrutiny, so that the principle that government in a democratic state should be held accountable and should be responsive to the needs of the people can also be realized. Because at the end of the day, you need to be able to strike the right balance, and I believe that that is what Katie Hammond was struggling to deal with. I don't think that he actually meant that opening up government to public scrutiny through the Right to Information Bill or the Right to Information Act is going to grind government to a halt.
Yeah, but those are his words. It's government cannot operate.
Maybe he went overboard, and I'm not holding brief for him. But I'm just simply trying to locate it within the balance that might be struck between having accessible, and responsive governance, and then also having enough, or sufficient levels of confidentiality in the management of public affairs, because it is not every aspect of public, life that must be open to public scrutiny. So, for instance, if you take the right to information itself, as it is, stipulated in Article 21F of the Constitution, it is very clear that the right itself is subject to laws that are necessary in a democratic society. So, for instance, laws relating to public safety, public defense, national security, and so on, can, due cognizance to the existence of the right, be couched in such a way that national security and defense are not imperiled as a result of opening up government to scrutiny. So I believe that he was trying to say, let us be able to strike that balance where the state can run on the basis of information that is needed in order to realize certain legitimate governmental objectives, including national security, national safety, public safety, and so on and so forth. So I believe that is the issue that he was trying to articulate. But let me also say that it is
but you're trying to rationalize for him.
I'm not holding brief.
Should we simply condemn it?
No, let me tell you.
And move on with the substance of it?
Can I tell you something?
Because it begs the question. Like what it does to the citizens? Citizens already think you guys don't want to pass it. And then you hear a very senior colleague say this.
Right.
That you're already thinking, isn't that maybe, aren't there many more of you thinking the way he's thinking? The reason why you're dragging your feet? It's a fair concern.
Let me affirm what the chairman has said. That Katie Hammond has not made it a secret that he's
opposed to it.
That he's opposed to the bill, and he has a legitimate, right as a member of parliament to take that view that he has taken. It is an outlier view. It is not the mainstream view of most of us in the.
So he's in a minority in thinking the way he thinks.
I think so, because, for instance, if you take the Committee on Constitutional, Legal, and Parliamentary Affairs, all right, there is nobody that has opposed, or expressed a dissenting view as far as the bill is concerned, either from the minority or from the majority. Our report, which was presented by the chairman to the plenary, was unanimous. There was no dissenting, view as far as the passage of the bill is concerned. Now, in the course of enactment, during the consideration stage, when a question is put on most of the provisions, you don't hear people saying no to the provisions. And I'm sure Joy FM and Joy TV, you have been monitoring everything. And the chairman is here. Kojo Asanti, who has been working on this matter for over a decade, can also confirm that even now we are going at a much faster rate than when I was Deputy Attorney General and was piloting the bill through Parliament. Okay, so I believe that there is sufficient goodwill within the House for the bill to pass. Now, whether or not we will pass it by the deadline that has been given is another matter that will come.
Hold on. I'm going to come to that right after I hear from Dr. Kojo Asante on this very one. I guess the only reason why I'm making this initial comment is the fear that we have as citizens that there may be many more Katie Hammonds in Parliament who hold this view privately and will be acting on that private view in killing the bill when it comes to passage, and that he may not be the only one.
Yeah. First of all, his view is not legitimate. It's a violation of the Constitution. Article 21F is very clear. This is a human right. You have a right to information, limited by what is necessary in a democratic society. And if you go to Article 12, the injunction on the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary is very clear. The fundamental human rights and freedoms enshrined in this chapter shall be respected and upheld by the executive, legislature, and judiciary, and all other organs of government and its agencies where applicable to them, by all natural and legal persons. So if you're an MP and you stand up or you publicly say, no, the Constitution has basically enjoined you to enforce a human right of a Ghanaian citizen, but you are saying that you won't do it. If it was the right to vote, would you say that, well, I don't think that the right to vote, would inure to my benefit if I happen to be in government, and therefore we should discard it? I think it's a very, very serious statement for a member of parliament. So, and this is not the first time he's expressed these views. And not only just expressed them, he has actively acted to disrupt parliament's proceedings by always raising issues of quorum when there is a discussion about the So, for me, he is impeding my human right.
Okay.
And so I take it very personally when I hear a member of parliament. Being a public servant in parliament, it's not a convenience that, so that you can have a convenience of working. You are there to ensure that the Constitution is enforced and that, Ghanaians benefit from it. So this posture, I do not accept it. I do not applaud it.
Is he in the minority?
I don't take
You've
it
been
as
working
being
with MPs. Is he in the minority?
Well, I
in
think for the committee, and I speak for these honorables that I've worked with, who have, worked very hard. The bill, the 2018 bill, has come a long way, even in a short period. And we'll get to talk about some of the details. There are a few that are still outstanding, but I think for the most people that I've seen, they are willing to work. There's some concern about where the parameters, the restrictions should be set. And a lot of it is language, because you are worried about how people will interpret where the lines are drawn. So for me, I think when I always tell the honorables that you are not going to be an honorable forever. This is something that benefits you,
You'll be on this side
your children, benefits your. So this posture that there is us against them, I don't find it as useful. And I hope that we'll continue to push and really get this
bill passed. Let's come to that. Let's go to the substance now, and let's start with the deadline you imposed on yourself. There's by 15th November deadline. Are you keeping to that deadline?
Yes, just to add a little to what Dr. Ayine has said, by the good faith that Parliament has demonstrated so far in its eagerness and willingness to ensure that this bill is passed within the shortest possible time. We all will recall that this bill was presented to Parliament in March, even under a certificate of urgency, which means that this bill was expected to have been passed within the shortest possible time, which was referred to us by the Speaker. We went through it and came up with the decision that, given the checkered history of the bill and the fact that it is a bill that a lot of people have much interest in, it ought not to be passed under the certificate of agency. So we reported back to Parliament. And thereafter, we thought it expedient to organize a stakeholder engagement to which Dr. attended. And they expressed all kinds of views. As I'm talking now, leadership in Parliament has put in place a working group, winnowing group. And what the winnowing group does is that anytime a bill is presented to Parliament and referred to a committee, after the committee has worked on the bill is referred to the winnowing group, who will then examine all the proposed amendments. And the rationale behind the working group working on the proposed amendment is to ultimately ensure that controversies surrounding the proposed amendments are curtailed on the floor of Parliament, so that as soon as the bill is taken through the consideration stage, it goes as quickly as possible.
Good.
And leadership in Parliament, led by Chairman Sabosu, has said many times with our number, that this bill is one of the bills that have been prioritized. So you realize that anytime you pick the other paper, the Right to Information bill is one of the bills that are publicized.
Okay. Fantastic.
So
will you pass it by 15th November?
We have as many. I won't say yes, I won't say no.
No, you don't have the luxury.
The reason is
you imposed a deadline on yourself last week.
Yes.
So myself, Dr. Santi, and the public, we're hoping that you keep your word. So you can't say I will not. You said you will.
Yes, the point is that Dr. Yene knows, and Dr. Santi even knows that when they came before the committee, they proffered a lot of amendments.
Okay.
We have as many as 138 amendments.
Okay.
And we've done about just a few.
Yeah, we've done it.
And we are still considering amendments as and when they come.
So let's settle this so that we don't lift people's expectations because of the deadline and people are counting. We cannot, based on what you just said, and we'll go to the details of why we can't, pass this by November 15th. True or not?
No, what I'm saying is that leader has said that given the exigencies.
I want us to be honest.
Yes.
So when is 15th?
Leader has said it.
Yes.
That we'll try and pass it by 15th.
You are working on the bill.
Yes,
I'm asking whether we can do that within that time.
Possible to pass this bill before 16th. But given the numerous amendments that we have, I'm afraid whether we can do it before the 15th. Because
I need
on the 15th,
let me just add briefly. Okay, yeah.
On the 15th,
there's a budget.
Yes. And leader has again intimated to us that even if we are not able to pass it by the 15th, we'll take it after the budget has been read. Because when the budget is read, there is an interval
before the debate starts.
Before the debate starts. So during that transition or period, he will see whether we'll try and facilitate and fast track the process in order to have the bill passed.
Doc,
before
Parliament I was just going to reinforce what my chairman has said. We have over 130-something proposed amendments, that have been considered and accepted and advertised on the order paper, which means that they must be taken each one at a time. Given my own experience, when we were trying to pass the bill in the last Parliament, it used to be the case that I could reckon we would do like 10 amendments per day. Now at that rate, and that even if we are going faster, I think the last time on Friday, when I counted, we did about 15. Now at that rate, it's not possible for us to meet the November 15th deadline. And I think that is why leadership is considering, giving us more time after the budget for us to be able to deal with it as one of the urgent matters.
When is Parliament rising for Christmas?
I think it's the 22nd. 22nd of December.
Looking at the work you have, can you tell us that before you rise, this is law?
Is this
no, I mean, I want us to, let's nail it down. So we can hold you to it. We have something to hold you. You give me 50 is not possible. So can we get it before?
My difficulty is that I will wish that this bill was even passed today. But my difficulty is that it is the business committee that arranges business items for Parliament, for a week.
And thankfully, Chairman Sambungs is a man who does
And
that.
so I know.
And he gave 15, but he said 15 is not
So
possible.
I know that anytime the business committee meets to consider business items for the August House, they will definitely factor the right to information bill.
So as we speak today, you can tell us if, I think 15 we all agree, you say you can, it's not possible. You can't tell us if before you rise it's possible.
Before we rise, it may be possible. Because I don't want to say with a lot of certainty and exactitude that this bill will be passed before Parliament rises. What about if it doesn't materialize? Then I will be held accountable for it.
That's what I want to do, actually.
So that's why I want to...
I must add, I just want to add that, you see, as a committee, all right, we work under leadership. We don't control the agenda of Parliament.
True.
All right, so in that, wise, it is impossible for the chairman of the committee to sit here and set
and make that pronouncement
when he knows very well that he does not control the agenda of Parliament. We are subject to what leadership through the business committee and then the Speaker's office. It says is going to be the business of Parliament going forward.
No. For me, the most important thing is delayed, and we were really disappointed the last Parliament, the last meeting. Parliament was very, after we had really built a lot of momentum from the committee, we came back and we were only able to do, I think, 5 clauses or so. And that was disappointing because I thought that we could have moved quicker. For me, what is important is that we have to have a credible bill.
Fundamentally.
It has to be credible. It's not just an exercise in just passing any law. So the amendments are important and we are following them very closely.
Let's go to the specifics. What in there you think will make this credible?
We have advanced, as I said, with there's a lot of work that has been done. It was done at the committee level. If you talk about the
sticking points.
If you talk about, I want to also give credit. So if you talk about the time periods for requesting for information, which was around 28 days and so on, a lot of that was cut to 14 and so on.
So right now it's 14 days?
14 days for most of them.
Some are even
7. And also, I have seen in the recent debates that the clause 5, dealing with information pertaining to the president, office, and vice president, that the proposal we made that we need to define very narrowly what we mean by the president office, and it's been clear that now that refers to the president information that is prepared for the president or the vice president, and not the president office, which was the initial rendition of it. So that has been addressed. What for me is critical and is clause 13, and this is which I know has been stood down 13 and 14. And clause 13 basically says that this is referring to
exempt information,
internal working of the public institution.
Information exempt from disclosure, which, if disclosed, will reveal an opinion, an advice, a report, a recommendation prepared or record, or be a consultation or a deliberation held in the course of or for the purpose of making a decision in the public service or a public institution, and which can reasonably be expected to frustrate or inhibit the candid and deliberate process of a public institution or between public institutions. Is that the one?
Yes. And this is fundamental because this is dealing with all public institutions.
This is really like...
This is everything.
Everything. This is everything.
And the problem I have with this clause is that it completely defeats the whole idea of a right to information.
If you're watching this, what this means is, what I just read, is exempt. In other words, if you apply under the Freedom of Information Law, you can be denied if it's determined that the information is what? An opinion.
It's an opinion.
It's an advice.
An advice, a report or a recommendation prepared or recorded, or a consultation or a deliberation held in the course or for the purpose of making a decision in the public service.
So that's what it is.
Now for me, you see, the Constitution is very clear that the limitation is a limitation that is necessary in a democratic society. All right? It's not what is convenient. For a lot of these actions or activities of public servants, they are mandated by law. There are people who are supposed to advise ministers. They're supposed to prepare technical reports. So you take an evaluation report for instance, or an advice.
Yeah.
By this, you're saying it's excluded. It's exempt information. A consultation or a deliberation, a board consultation or deliberation, where a board report is prepared, a board minutes is prepared for a public agency, you're saying that it's exempt. You can begin to look at all of those things. Now, when you raise this, people refer you to clause 17 and say that there is a public interest, a harms test. But a harms test
Please
is
explain the harms test, please.
Basically, that in spite of the exemptions, you can still go and make an argument that disclosure, right, is basically the harm caused by disclosure.
Does the benefit, the benefit outweighs
the harm caused by disclosure, right? So that's the harms test. But that is your last resort. It actually reinforces that this is a right.
No, what they're saying is, if you are denied, you can go under the harms test, and then what? You apply to a court, right?
Well, we'll come to that. Even on a normal basis, you can say this, my position is that, and the person denies you, then you have the appeal process.
Okay.
But the point is that you don't start from the harms test.
Okay.
Right? It is a right to information, not a denial of information law. All right? It's a right to information. So all of those, for me, it is such a big, and then
very significant.
The committee made a proposal to amend this. So they removed or deleted a report or recommendation prepared or recorded, but kept an opinion and advice.
Yes. But which then covers everything.
For me, it is still, we said that this provision should not be there.
Completely.
It should not be there because the objective is that somehow all of these things are going to frustrate and inhibit the candid and deliberative process of a public institution or between public institutions. I don't think the activities that we are, and that's why I was giving an example of a procurement process where you have, so many people. There are officers whose job is to advise. And you're saying that the advice would inhibit those processes.
Even when they bring consultants, they will cover
but it might, even for the technical officers and the ministers themselves, it offer a defense when there's a problem. Because you say, this is the advice I gave.
True.
It just wasn't taking.
True.
Right? So for me,
we've seen that play out in many of the cases that we've dealt with.
This is fundamental, and we've been going back and forth with the committee on this. They have obvious different views about it.
I'll get them to do.
But I want to use the opportunity to make the case again.
Yes.
That for me, this provision has to be looked at. Otherwise, it is one of the weaknesses.
Fantastic. Now, we're going to deal with this. I'm going to get Dr. Aine first to have a bite at this, and I'll get Dr. Ben Abdallah to have a bite at this, and then we'll go to the other issue. But this is very fundamental. We'll take a short break. When we return, I'll hear the two members, the chairman and the ranking, on this concern raised by civil society on that particular clause. Stay with us. This is PM Express. You're so live on PM Express. The conversation is rolling on as we get to the specifics. There's one key sticking point that Dr. Kojo Asante raised, which is about one exemption, which he's pointed out is one that could, in essence, defeat the whole purpose of the bill. And this is an exemption if it has to do with an opinion, an advice, a report, or recommendation prepared to or recorded, or a consultation or deliberation held in the course of a purpose of making a decision. And he's argued this point. Dr. Aine, why do we have this in this bill as we
Okay, well, I think Dr. Asante has a very legitimate point.
Okay.
And that point is that where you have an exemption regime or a set of clawback clauses that basically take back the right that has been granted, then you render the bill, toothless. I mean, it won't have teeth to bite in practice.
Is that what this clause does?
That is not what it does actually, and I think that it is, a very wonderful thing that he has given the committee credit, for accepting to expunge report and recommendation from section, clause 13(1)(a).
Yeah.
But we still maintain that
opinion
it is
advice.
important that we maintain opinion and advice. That, for instance, if a journalist writes in respect of an advice that has been proffered by, say, the chief director of a ministry, to his minister, all right, we think that that should be
Exempt.
It should be exempt. The reason is simply because otherwise then confidential advice to, ministers and to sector heads and agencies, okay, for purposes of the conduct of state business cannot be, rendered, okay, because of the fact that it will be, open to scrutiny. The advice that has been proffered by a director or, a staff at a ministry can be requested for by a journalist and then put in the public domain that this director or this is the line of advice that was given to the minister. Maybe if the advice, was in any form or shape misleading, then you are exposing that, person to public ridicule, and the person will not be in a good state to, work properly and advise the minister. So I think that as far as this clause is concerned, opinion, for instance, especially in the case of the Attorney General, okay, that of course the Attorney General's opinion is covered by the Legal Profession Act,
yes,
because the Attorney General is advising as a lawyer to the government.
Already,
all right, it's privilege already. But I think that one of the things, the disturbing things that I found in government was that there was a certain lack of confidentiality. Okay, that even without a Freedom of Information Act, okay, things were leaking left, right, center, and they are still leaking left, right, center today.
Yeah.
Okay, so that level of confidentiality is important for the internal workings of government. So I think that we should still maintain, the
Can I do a comeback on this?
Yeah, you come back, but I want to hear the chairman's. The chairman, you also hold the view that it should be there?
Yes, in fact, that was Friday when we got to this clause. I moved the amendment, and subsequently, upon a closer reading of it, I implored the House to have those proposed amendments stood down.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have stood it down. So I don't want to feed any information to the public.
What would the standing it down do?
The standing it down means that we have to fine-tune and have to work more on in order to make it.
But civil society says we don't want it
but
there
the point
in
is
the first place.
But the point is that the point we have to take note is that any exempt information or clause, must first of all be subjected to the harm test. Yeah. The harm test means that the disclosure is likely to injure or imperil a protected interest. However, but if the disclosure would not injure or imperil any protected interests, that information will have to be disclosed. So that is why.
But even if it's going to injure somebody, but the benefit outweighs the injury.
Yes, that is the public interest override. So if, yes, the information will not injure anybody or imperil any protected interest, it's been exempted. But first of all, the information must pass that test before it will be exempted.
Who makes that determination, by that? I want to know in the law.
It is the information officer.
Who is the information officer?
The information officer will be appointed for every public institution.
Okay.
And it is the information officer, upon the receipt of any application to access information, will have to determine whether the information to be disclosed is exempt or not exempt. So it is his responsibility to classify all kinds of information. Those kinds of information that are exempt and those that are not exempt. And there's a criteria to be followed in classifying the information. You have to look at the information. Does it border on national security, for instance? Is it information that is in transit to the president? If information, for instance, is coming from a public institution to the president, it's not advisable to say that such information should be disclosed, because the information is in transit and the information has not gotten to the president yet. And we don't know what the information contains, whether it borders on national security or it borders on public safety, public morality, and so on and so forth, or whether it borders on the contravention of any law or enactment. So it is proper and fair that that information should get to the president, for the president to have a look at the information, read through the information, examine whether it is one of the categories of information that is exempt from disclosure. It is upon that assessment that that information or the information officer will decide whether, yes, let me release this information because it's not one of the categories of information that should be exempt from disclosure. But I quite understand his point. But the point that he's making, that an opinion or an advice should not be exempt from disclosure. They proffered that amendment, and to a large extent, we agreed with them halfway. Therefore, the committee decided to delete a report, a recommendation prepared or recorded. But we decided to maintain an opinion or an advice. Adding to what Dr. Yene has said, because an opinion is not definitive. An advice is not definitive. It's not fair to release an advice into the domain of the public if subsequently that advice is changed or that advice is not accepted by anybody to whom that advice is meant for. That change of position will subsequently feed the public with information which is contrary to the advice provided by whoever is obligated.
I don't get your point. I mean, I've been in this job for 15 years, and I've seen many cases where the legal officer for an institution offers an advice, the minister ignores that advice, takes a decision that eventually turns out to be problematic, i.e., it turns out that financial loss has been caused because he ignored that advice. In fact, we saw it in in the Slate case, for example, that came up. The legal officer made an advice. The guy in charge said, disregarded the advice, causes allegedly financial loss. Right? So I've seen that many times.
What would be the informational value? If I may play the role of a journalist, I mean, what would be the informational value?
I mean, we got to know that somebody warned this public officer that this decision you're going to take will be injurious to the public interest.
No, that is after the decision has been taken. But before the decision has been taken, and this provision potentially will rope in advice that is given prior to the decision having been taken by the decision maker. All right. Now, my question is, what will be the informational value to, for instance, a journalist who is doing an investigation of that advice that has been proffered to the decision maker, even before the decision has been made? Now, in one particular area where this may be very disruptive in terms of government business, is procurement.
Yeah.
All right. It's public procurement. Where, for instance, you have
which is what we see it play out.
Advice of the entity tender committee that says that this is what is going to, be the position of, the minister or department or agency.
Because you coming after him.
Yeah, and then somebody, gets hold of that. Okay. Meanwhile, the final decision hasn't been taken on the procurement, and then it is leaked to the public.
I think we are stretching that argument. I think we are really stretching it because that will not be even consistent with the rules of procurement in terms of how the law will operate. Everybody, the tender, the bidding process, and all of those things require that there's confidentiality along the line.
Yeah.
But what we are saying is that when a matter comes up, and I say I want the evaluation report.
True. As a journalist, that's the only time I'll be interested in information.
By this rendition, you are excluding it.
True.
You see, what we are saying is that this is a public office. Often, the technocrats complain all the time. Well,
we give them advice. Yes.
But it puts accountability along the chain.
Yeah.
So what we need to cure is to make the case that, yes, it cannot be at the time of the deliberative process.
And you believe the technocrats?
Oh no,
when
but
even
ministers get ministers are
giving. Is worried about leak.
Ministers
but
are
leak
giving,
will not be
ministers are giving. Ministers can be giving wrong information. But when the paper trail comes and says, "Oh, what actually?" Nobody wrote anything down. But when you say advice, opinion, those things can be requested because those officers, when they get their appointment letters, part of their job description is to advise, to offer opinion. These are public office responsibilities.
Yeah.
And if you go to the public financial management laws, they are actually held responsible for these decisions. So it is consistent with what you have to do in public service. But what we need to do to cure this is to ensure that that report is still available when we have to come and make account.
Yeah.
So it is not that in the course of double track, there's a deliberation, the chief director, technical officers are provided, and then in the middle somebody comes and says, I want your, before it even goes to the minister. That will be absurd.
No, yeah, that will,
so
no journalist will make that
how we cure that? The second point about the hamsters is that if you start from the hamsters in accessing this information, you shift the burden
to the guy applying for the information.
That's right. But the right is mine. It is for the state to come and say, I'm denying you because it is necessary in a democratic society.
Yes. And the state might argue why.
Yes.
You shift it when you start with the, and that puts a burden on me to go and justify that it's beneficial to have the entity tender committee evaluation report.
Yeah. Dr. Abdallah.
No,
sorry,
that's not the point. You see, the point here is that if I say the harm test, there is no burden on the applicant to justify why he wants the information. There is no burden.
No, if it's proactively disclosed,
yes,
there's no
burden at all.
Yeah.
That is why
it's when it's exempt. Yeah,
in the original rendition, when it was proposed that every applicant must give a reason, the committee felt that was below the belt. So we deleted.
And that has also been,
So you apply without any reason. But there is a responsibility on the information officer in refusing your request to state why he's refusing your request.
Of course.
I'm refusing your request because it borders on national security.
Okay.
Understand? Now, Dr. Sante says that
after he's refused me.
Yes, after he's refused you, you have the right to appeal against the decision. That we don't even want to go there. But the point here is that the exemption clauses are not sacrosanct.
Oh yeah, sure.
Are not sacrosanct. Yeah. So anytime an issue should crop up, should any issue crop up in relation to any exempt clause, exempt provision, that is where probably the veil of inviolability of that exempt clause will be lifted.
Okay.
For instance, an issue has cropped up. The information officer says that it's exempt. You are challenging the information officer to the extent that that information is not exempt. Where are you taking the matter to? You either take the matter, first of all, you take the matter to the head of that public institution.
Yeah.
Then it will be decided. You are saying this information is exempt based on A, B, C, D, and E. Prove it. If he's able to prove that yes, opinion, advice, and for this or that reason, the information is exempt to the satisfaction of the head of the institution, then that's all. Even beyond that, the applicant still has the right to appeal against the decision of the head of the institution, if you like, the right to the information commission, which is yet to be established in the bill, on appeal to the High Court. So there are processes of appeals.
The High Court, that's also Supreme Court.
No, to the High Court.
Yeah,
we've amended that.
But there's a problem with that.
We've amended that.
You've amended that?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
so we can go High Court.
No, we will amend that because we haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
We will amend that.
Okay.
So, like I said initially, the 13th clause has been stood down. We should not spend or dwell too
Yeah.
I mean,
much.
I get it.
But I just wanted to point out that I mean, to Chairman, the clause 13, you know, as we were discussing during the break, is modeled along the lines of the UK, I mean, Freedom of Information Act of 2000. You know, Section 35 of which contains in subsection 2, you know, provisions similar to what we have adopted. But I mean, with some modifications. So I think that it is possible for us to maintain such a regime, okay, taking out the report and recommendation, but for us to maintain a regime of this nature in a democratic society. I don't think that it is necessarily, I mean, kind of antithetical to the exercise of the right to information. I don't think so.
I disagree.
I know. Just because of time, I want to take Dr. Aine. I know there are other issues in the bill that it's of paramount importance to you. I want to touch on some of the key things that you think we need to still deal with before we pass. I want everybody to sort of, because this is not the only sticky point.
Right.
No, I think
so very briefly,
for me, and I haven't made this view, I mean, known to, you know, my chairman. So sorry, Mr. Chairman, that I'm saying this for the first time. But I have always maintained that we don't need another level of bureaucracy in order to be able to enforce the provisions of the Right to Information Act. Okay. We don't need a Right to Information Commission that is dedicated, you know, to dealing with these matters. When you have a regime that allows for appeal, you know, to heads of institutions, and then from there you can apply for judicial review to the High Court. Okay. I think that, you know, I mean, a standalone bill that is not supervised by another, I mean, a level of bureaucracy will work for us better than if we have the Right to Information, I mean, a commission. That is one.
I think you need an arbiter in this case, because you can imagine the kinds of opposition you are going to get going to. And then you're talking about the High Court. I mean, how many people are accessing the High Court? You need an arbiter, and I think we've gone over particularly the Right to Information Commission is something that we have been debating.
Yeah, you are for it?
I am absolutely for it. Okay. I think not a large, you know, we said a 3-member commission.
Finally, and this is not the final conversation, because this is something that's going to. When do you want this passed? I think that's the bottom line. Once you've dealt with the credibility,
for me, it is about how fast we move on
dealing with this. So you don't mind if you take your time and deal with the issues and then pass it later?
We need. You see, we don't want the pace that was introduced the last meeting. Okay. And the suspicion that people just don't want to move quickly on it. I think the pace that has been shown in the last couple of days should continue.
Okay. If we continue at that pace, don't give me a firm thing, because I say you don't want to do that. Yeah. When should we expect this pass? If you go at the pace that you started?
Tentatively, we should expect the passage of the bill by the end of this year.
By the end of this year?
Yeah,
tentatively. Okay. I'm grateful. We're going to keep to that. Yes. I'm grateful. Doc, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a conversation on RTI bill. We'll make some progress here. Doc has expressed a view that he's not expressed before. And let's see how this goes into the bill. Join us again tomorrow. My name is Evan Smith. Enjoy the rest of your evening.